world in general, especially in America right now. Anyone have any ideas, maybe Layla or Bhavesh or anybody else willing to speak on just what we can begin to do as just people in general, as humans, as nonprofit navigators, as a community to start to just break down systemic bias? What do you know what anything that we can just start to be able to do, just broad things that we can continue to break it down as a group?
Hi, Evan. I'm a student at Chatham University, and one thing that we do in some of my courses is to check your biases. So we've taken those self-biases tests, so to look at those. Also do the research. You know, you have all this information at your disposal, so don't just go and ask your friends, but also do the research, go to the library, check out books, read, figure out what you need to know, and then take extra steps as well.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely beginning to take extra steps is one thing. And then what Sonali said, she was also part of our one of our teams. Just being able to be on this platform and contribute with a powerful message is very overwhelming and a blessing, that she said. And just the vision for the statement really came through and shows our passion for social change. And I believe that Nonprofit PGC is just doing a wonderful job showing that we are here and we stand with you and we want to continue to do social change. And then you can see our racial inequity and equity initiatives as well. But I know Rachel had a question that she wanted to address to everybody, so I will hand it over to her for just a second. So yeah.
Yeah, so the video clearly, as both Elijah and Jessica and a few others mentioned, had diversity not only in terms of the faces of all the nonprofit navigators who are there, but diversity of thought as well, given the survey that we sent out. So we would make sure that we have everyone's input. And I think being on the marketing communications team, being part of the team who wrote the statement, it's one thing to see it, you know, words on a paper, and it's another thing to see it come to life with actual faces. So I'm really, the video is very powerful to me as well, even though I had, like I said, seen it before. But yeah, I would like to move on to ask a question. Oh, by the way, please feel free to submit any questions or comments in the chat or in the question and answer thing. If you don't want your name to be shown, you can just get rid of it and change it to anonymous or don't disclose, and then we won't read it out loud. Yeah, so moving on. What policy should be put in place to address the systemic racial injustice in America? And if you don't mind, I'd like to highlight the responses of the public policy team first. So if anyone on that team would like to share, please do, and then we'll hear from others as well. Okay, if no one from that team wants to speak yet, that's fine. I think we might have a few others joining us from that team in a moment. So would anyone else like to speak on that question and what policies we want to see going forward?
Hi, Rachel. There are just so many. It's just hard to pick one to begin with, but the first one that comes to my mind is thinking about guns and how easy it is to get them, and then also just access to guns as well as guns being in schools. I know I was in 7th grade when Sandy Hook happened, and so like as soon as that happened, we started having more and more lockdown drills. We had them as frequently as fire drills, and so that was pretty jarring to me as well.
If I can, could you speak a little bit more on that? What like kinds of gun policies do you think there need to be that pertain to this, you know, race equity issue?
There's just so many loopholes, so closing those as well, but also just like who has access to them, also thinking about mental health. In the United States, it's so easy to get them there. I think just like 2 steps, and then there are even loopholes when it comes to that, but it's not taken seriously enough to decide like who should and who should be able to get guns, and also where you get them from. And then even in states where they have concealed carry laws, like there are still African Americans and people and Black and Indigenous persons of colors who carry guns, who have their papers, and they still get shot by police officers as well at higher rates than their white counterparts.
Absolutely, I hear you on that one.
Yeah, and just speaking of which, on guns, just glad you brought that up. But of course, you can't scroll through the news without seeing Kyle Rittenhouse and his name, who a guy who was 17 years old, and he got to go walk home after literally shooting and murdering 2 people got to walk home, sleep in his bed at night for about 2 or 3 nights, and then be able to get arrested and then probably, you know, charged with something not as just battery instead of murder or something along those lines. But would anybody just like to speak on that issue as well? Just of course, with Kyle and then Jacob Blake, just a lot of stuff going on. But how can Kyle, as a 17-year-old white male, walk by, you know, police officers and not them literally just be like, all right, that's cool, no worries, he gets to go home. But then other people like 12-year-old Tamir Rice, I believe, and for having one of those, literally just a pellet gun or whatever. And then even in our own county, just Archie Elliott, when he was in 1993, when he was already handcuffed, already sitting in the car, just shot because he was threatening in a position, even though he was already handcuffed and sat down. And then, of course, Jacob Blake, who was trying to break up a fight between 2 white women and then just shot mercilessly in the back 7 times. It's just a double standard, as Audace Garnett, sorry if I mispronounced her name, just said, but it's right. And does anyone else have just anything else to say just regarding that? And then we can go back to the other question, but just wanted to see anybody's reaction to that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the culture in policing needs to change, and I think that what could be done is a mandatory sentencing or some sort of something that they receive when these sort of things take place, where they because I feel like a lot of officers either have something to prove or sometimes caught up in the moment, which leads to these situations to take place. But you know, some sort of punishment, that's the word I was looking for, that's mandatory when these sort of things come. And it's obviously a civil rights violation, whether they're profiling or whatever led up to the death or the demise, assassination really, of the individual in the situation. I think that would begin to change and shift the culture to be more cognizant of how they react to certain things.
Do you guys think that the juxtaposition of these two things of Kyle and Jacob together happening like very close in time to each other impacted the public response to this at all?
I wanted to touch a little bit on that, and I was thinking about the media, because one thing that stood out to me for these situations and a lot of other things that happen is how they're covered. Like, you see the headlines and they're a little different. It's like, oh, there's a whole story about how Kyle was painting graffiti or getting rid of graffiti before he went out and murdered people. And then, you know, the story's framed in a completely different light when it's somebody else. So I think it's just how every piece of the puzzle when events like this occur are skewed and, like you said, a double standard. So it's just, it needs to, yes, I think I agree with like the culture in policing needs to change, but also the culture in media. Who's writing the stories that cover these shootings? Who's writing the stories that cover the arrests? And why are they given different headlines? Who's reading them? So there's just so many, and I'm not an expert on that media. I'm sure some of you guys on the marketing and all that have thought about that a lot too, but that's just something that really stands out to me, because when I'm trying to take in the information, I am trying to be a little more self-aware and realizing, wow, this headline might not be as accurate, or it might be biased to a certain group of people. So just everything. And I think that also impacts the public response. And people also, another thing, people look for excuses and ways to justify certain people's actions, but not others. So like with the graffiti thing, or people try to justify, I've seen a graphic recently. It's like, if a black person's carrying a gun, they're a thug. If it's someone else, they might be a terrorist, but a white person is a complicated individual with mental health issues and we can help them. So it's just all the ways that little things are phrased, and even the little pieces of information that are given to the public influence us in ways that we don't even realize.
But I wanted to go back to that question on policy. And, you know, initially my reaction was, how can we trust the same system that oppressed us to now relieve that oppression? But if we're going to talk about policy, I feel like we need to start at the root as opposed to the fruit of the situation, which is police brutality and all these other situations that come about. And I kind of feel like when we look at the root and we look at the economic situations that may contribute to like the segregation, whether it be in different neighborhoods, and that may breed just, I don't know, I think animosity sometimes between two groups. So all of the other situations that may lead to tension between races, between power, between classes, I feel like we need to approach that using public policy. And for me, it directly leads to education. We need more funds for that to make sure our schools are good, our healthcare system is revamped. I think those sort of areas, if we target our focus towards that, it will definitely yield, I think, great results. I mean, talk about gun control, that's excellent. But leading up to that point where someone decides to take up a gun, what other things happen behind the scene? And you know, you always hear the argument on the news, well, if we tighten up the gun laws, well, you can always buy it on Facebook. You can buy a gun on the corner. So I think our time will be better spent if we focus on the root of the issue, like what's going on below the surface. Not to knock all the other public policy type things that could be helpful in this situation as well.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. Would you mind, or someone else can jump in too, explaining like how specifically the education system could be reformed? Like, are we talking busing? Are we talking more funding for teachers? Are we talking more books written by people of color, authors of color? All of the above, please share.
There's an author, her name is Lalita Tademi, and I saw her speak one time, and she says the victor writes the story. And so that is something that I keep in the back of my mind. There's also keeping in mind the danger of a single story. So like Callie said, when it came to social media, it is who is the one putting the information out and what is being covered up, but also it's who is telling the story, and that is so, so important.
So definitely that, like who's selling the story being told. But like if you look at, for instance, Montgomery County, where I grew up, and there's like a drastic difference between when you go to certain areas in Rockville versus like a Silver Spring. It's completely different. And just look at Maryland in general, where you have PG and Montgomery County and all these different situations where they're different. I kind of feel like the problem is that the way the system is designed right now in public school will cause many people to consider charter schools as a possible option for better results in students. So I kind of feel like that deserves some attention, but that's a whole nother conversation. But definitely the reading material that students are getting, because I myself didn't learn much about race in general until I got to college. And a lot of individuals don't know about like who they are as people until they get to these certain levels in academia. And I think that's the issue, because we know all about Christopher Columbus and George Washington. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked at very closely in education, and also access to higher education as well.
Yeah, I agree with Elijah, especially when it comes to like addressing like the root of like the causes of racism and how it continues to be perpetuated. You know, even as we grow and like we always talk about how like the younger generations are getting more progressive, it needs to be like that needs to continue. And I think it starts with like at the beginning, like anti-racist education and curriculums being implemented in, you know, K through 12, pre-K education. So that means like making sure that, you know, all curriculums, all schools, they are, they're talking about, you know, the ugly history of America and its history of racism. And then how can what can we learn from this and how can we do better? Because a lot of places, they think that erasing that history, erasing, you know, painting Thanksgiving and, you know, general relations between white settlers and Native Americans was, you know, like all like happy go lucky and like, you know, they, you know, have dinner at Thanksgiving and it's like all fun and games, but it's not. And I think all of our like students need to learn that it wasn't like that. And that's why a lot of, you know, problems with racism that we have are still today. It comes from history. And we need to, in our education, we need to learn better and do better, like we said in our statement.
Yeah. Like the fact that I specifically as a white child was able to come out of middle school with an understanding of US history that was essential, race in US history, which essentially was slavery happened, that was bad. Then Jim Crow happened, that was also bad. But then MLK led a big march on Washington and fixed all of it. Like, I think that is basically the understanding of racial history in the United States that many students leave elementary and middle school, if not also high school with, which is insane. Like I don't, and that's as much of a disservice as, you know, teaching only addition in math, through high school, I think. And so, but the fact that we spent, so long in social studies, I could still tell you Ferdinand Magellan's exact path around the world. But I didn't know about, explicit federal housing segregation in the US, like the way that our entire system of housing has explicitly created by race. I didn't know that until college. Like, I find that insane, mind-boggling, and explicitly that, I mean, I don't know if there's another word for it other than propaganda.
I completely agree. And I feel like it needs to go further than just reading books, reading your assigned books. We actually need to have conversations and comparing the past and the present. And I feel like that's something a lot of teachers don't like to do. And even just like in the education system in our country, I think like some books are censored in some states, which is like just really goes to show that like we don't like to face our dark history. And it's extremely important that we acknowledge the historical trauma that Black people have faced and continue to face. And we need to stop tiptoeing around the subject. And I completely agree with Stephen that my education has done me no good in, learning about our country's dark history and all of the racial inequities that Black people have faced and continue to face. So.
Back to what Rachel said earlier. Oh, go ahead, Elena.
Okay. I was going to say, like, what all you guys are saying is really good and important. I think also the education is, we can't just, like what someone else was saying, you can't just read about it, you actually do things. I think also in elementary schools, it's important to, have discussions, but also have speakers come in and maybe also have more diverse staff or more teachers, based on the county. Prince George's County, is majority Black, but also in other counties in Maryland, it can be majority white or not a large majority of people who come from diverse backgrounds. I think that's important too. And I think last summer, was it last summer? Yeah, 2019, I was a part of the Freedom Schools program where I worked for 6 weeks with kids. And we learned about the Children's Defense Fund, which is founded by Marion Wright Edelman. And we actually met her, which is really interesting and cool. And she was actually pushing for, public policy and pushing for children to receive these different types of readings and different types of speakers, things like that. So it's really important just to have speakers come in and, diversify the staff as well.
So back to what Rachel said earlier about resources, it's about who's getting the resources, who is giving them. And so that's why the census is so important to fill out. It helps determine your legislative districts, the money, the schooling, the busing, all of those things. And then to what Aaron and Elena said, it's about who has the authority to make these decisions about schools, like school boards, are they appointed or are they elected? The US does not have a centralized education system, so it's up to the states to decide. So the question I'll leave you all with is like, what are you actively doing to work against it? Are you voting? Are you paying attention? Are you registered? Like, how are you discussing this with your family and friends, with your elected officials?
Definitely very, very important. Amy, I noticed you were unmuting. Did you want to say something?
I was just saying that, I know in a lot of universities recently, students have been starting petitions to have specifically African American history centered classes added to each major. Specifically, one of my majors is theater, and we have a petition going around that every student who goes to the theater major should have to take an African American theater class. And I think that's something that's very important, but I think it should be starting younger, because even if we get that in college, it still waits until college before people start learning about different subjects from that side. And I think that's something that should be throughout. English classes should become more diverse in the kind of books they're reading, because a lot of the time you read the same books as every other student in the United States, and it's books that aren't necessarily relevant to the problems we're facing today. So I think it's very important that we start integrating that into classes, and I'm glad that it's universities, but there's a lot more.
Yeah, excellent points. Thank you, Amy, for that, and thank you for sharing. Everybody as well for sharing along that line. And then just going again back to just the policies that we can be put in place. I know I'm pretty sure Steven's on the public policy team. And then what we had this kind of question geared towards you guys, but you weren't on yet. But before you answer that, I was just going to say that Sonali said it was just very important to examine just the oppressive roots of this country and so many others. Just very the tip of the iceberg in a way. And of course it is. And of course we're seeing that continued now, the lack of healthcare, starvation wages, mass incarceration, the police brutality, lack of affordable education, and even lack of resources now in this coronavirus time towards those different communities as well. There's a ton to unpack, and I just wanted to hear from you, from the public policy team, and anyone else who has also hopped onto the policy team. What specific policies would you want to see, and what have kind of you guys been talking about to just address systemic racial injustice in America?
Sure. Thank you for that really broad question. Allows me to hit exactly the thing that I wanted to talk about. And that's not because I have a certain bone to pick or just specifically interested in this. I've been looking for a long time. I have this sort of like obsession with finding the root issue. Elijah, I think, talked about that before. It's important because, it's difficult to fix education without acknowledging education, how much it is based on where people live. And so I've really been, or the public policy team, we've been really doing a lot of digging into housing policy. It's not one that gets a lot of attention, but it is one that, it doesn't get a lot of attention because it's focused really locally. Most housing policy by far happens on the municipality level, so either county or town or city, making decisions about what kind of housing they want to accommodate. And so just to give a bit of history, until 1968, the federal government could and frequently did explicitly segregate on the basis of race for housing. For white families like mine, basically the entire way that we got ourselves into the middle and upper class, coming, as immigrants from Ireland or Italy or whatever, basically the entire way that happened is through federally backed loans from the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, and the VA, the Veterans Administration. This made buying houses really accessible. But as you may know what I'm gearing up to, the federal government explicitly banned people of color from those loans. You couldn't get them. So particularly Black families were stuck in this stage of renting. They needed to keep renting homes instead of buying and moving into the suburbs and developing generational wealth. So while this was made illegal in 1968, it still happens today, not explicitly on the basis of race, but by something called single family zoning. So in most municipalities in the US, except for like densely packed cities like New York or Philadelphia, Baltimore, most of their land in their city, in their municipality, you can only buy a single family home, which are most of the time in places like Montgomery County and Prince George's County going for $400,000, $500,000. This is not accessible for people who are currently renting a home and are not making like these massive salaries and can't get a mortgage. Black people are also discriminated against actively currently when it comes to mortgages, but that's, I guess, another issue that I could dive into. So we are not building housing that allows people to get from housing, from renting to buying a single family home, housing like two family, 3 family homes, duplexes, townhomes, condos, things like that. States that build a lot of those find that home ownership among people of color, particularly Black families, rises significantly, but we don't do it. And it's actually the issue that you think white people get like pissed off about like education reform or busing or like Medicare for all. This is the issue that like white communities fight more than any other. And you've seen the Trump administration get on it for a while. We have a, yes. Thank you. Or you didn't see that. Tiffany sent me a message. So she wanted me to mention that nonprofit Prince George's County is actually looking to get into this housing issue. So if you have opinions, if you have background in this, please hop on. You can either shoot me a message, shoot Tiffany a message. If this interests you, as like the core, I think, racial equity issue that it is, please, shoot us a message. We're looking to get into this. We're looking to do listening sessions with the community here in Prince George's County to find out ways and areas where we can build more affordable, accessible housing to get people from renting to buying their, sort of dream single family home so they can pass wealth down from generation to generation. And this has impacts on education, obviously. It has impacts on health. I'm sure you've heard of environmental justice, where, people will build, companies will build heavily polluting industry in primarily Black neighborhoods. But if we decrease the amount that there are primarily Black neighborhoods by allowing people basically to move wherever they want, the ability to pollute those neighborhoods. And if white people move into a neighborhood, you should see how quickly some of these things get cleaned up. So I know that was just a lot of information dump, but I wanted to make you all aware of it, just in case you weren't, and just to tell you that we're actively working on it if you want to lend a hand.
Stephen, those were amazing points. No need to apologize. We all can see what hard work the public policy team is doing, and that's, part of being a nonprofit navigator. Quick plug there. But we just wanted to just continue to talk about that. And obviously we talked about the education. We talked about, Stephen brought up the environmental issues. We talked about the systemic, and we talked about health, and then just the housing as well. And there's so many different fronts and so many different issues that we can continue to dive into, and that we will continue to dive into today. I just wanted to say that real quick. If you wanted to hop on over to our YouTube, or get anybody else to hop on over to our YouTube as well, we're streaming on there as well. And thank you guys for sticking with us through this continually. And then thank you for sure, Stephen, for sharing that as well. I guess, go ahead, Rachel.
No, I just like to say, Stephen, everything you said was really important and definitely needed to be said. I'd like to highlight one thing you said, which is that a lot of housing policy is done on the local level. So a lot of people, would think like, I'm not going to vote because like, it doesn't matter. Like the presidential vote is way beyond me. But like the fact that housing policy and so many other areas of policy are mostly done on a local level means that your vote, every single person's individual vote, can make a huge difference locally. And I still believe it makes a difference, presidentially as well. But definitely getting out the vote, I think, is one of the most important ways to address local policy, to elect officials who are going to change the policies that have been on the books for too long, and to enact new policies that will correct some of these wrongs and enable a more equitable future.
Yeah, honestly, like I've seen it before, like especially if you live in a town instead of like an entire county that doesn't have like specific towns, you get like 20, 30 of your friends to like, you tell them who you want to vote for, then they tell their friends. Like that could swing an election pretty easily on a local level, because not a lot of people vote for it or pay attention. And really, if there's honestly all this housing stuff, if there's one policy that you can advocate for on the local level that can change it, that can change the entire ballgame. And it's really simple to do. End single family zoning. And that's not a government mandate to build anything. It's not public housing. It's just allow developers to come in and build townhouses, duplexes, condos, things like that. Towns that don't want to do it, but if you organize and have your voice heard, like it's a really simple thing that can get done, and it makes a world of a difference for those who do it.
Yeah, that's awesome, Stephen. Just continuing to build off of the housing thing, we got a comment from YouTube from Josh, and saying how it's just interesting how housing policy has prevented many people of color from becoming homeowners. And you kind of can think about, he says he wonders if those who defend these policies appeal to family values instead of, keeping, or instead of just saying outright that they don't want minorities in their neighborhood or something like that, just to keep them out as well. And then Miss Tina Foster happily commented as well. There's a housing forum this week, so that's going to be in the description. Thank you so much, Miss Tina. But also my social media chair co-host Megan said, if you do have to step out, also you are entitled to follow along with us at Twitter. But yeah, just continuing to spread this effort for ending single loan family housing. That's what it's called?
Single family zoning.
Single family zoning.
Honestly,
okay.
I've I've been like annoying people in my town because I just keep adding people in my hometown and tweeting abolish single family zoning. But like, do it. Like,
you gotta do what you gotta do, right? And that's
it
what
works.
we're here for. And
it's
definitely
like huge venue. Like, you don't. It does not cost the government anything. There's no price tag associated with it. Literally, all you. It's. I mean, theoretically, like libertarians, it should be their like dream too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge like venue for racial equity.
Yeah, well, Stephen is clearly passionate about this, and then I think we're gonna kind of move on from the public policy question, but a perfect segue into our next question about just how our internship experience, and obviously Stephen just shared about his internship experience and his public policy, but anybody else is very welcome to share how our own personal internship experience just educated us about racial injustice in Prince George's County and or nationwide. And then I know that there are many people from many different teams, so I would love to hear the different aspects and the different kind of impact that our Nonprofit Navigator program has had on everybody. So I can go first for my team, and we're the social media capital team. And for me specifically, and for us, I'd say Megan, Bhavesh, and Alex, who were on my team, there's just a lot on social media, of course. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just racial injustice is really becoming something that is, I don't want to say popular, but I'm going to say popular because they're just like kind of advocating for it. Because before, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I wouldn't see any, like, I don't remember the names of those people who were unjustly murdered 2 years ago. But the George Floyd's name sticks in my head, and it's been 190 days or something crazy like that. And just all these different names are popping up, and it seems like there's just so many different things on social media that we can continue to kind of promote and get out there. And then, of course, what Callie said as well, we definitely have to take in those, and Layla, just the one story, and then the media, and then how that is kind of shaping us. So Megan, Bhavesh, and I, and our supervisor Lynn, have been just working to make sure that we strip our implicit bias and our internal biases before we continue to go forward with a post, continue to support this post, continue to support this person as well. And then just making sure that we're being respectful, but also fighting for the right things as nonprofit PGC, as an organization. And that kind of starts at the individual level. And my personal accounts, I would kind of not post and not be an advocate for things. But then I realized that just staying silent is not an option. It's no longer I don't know, cool or no longer whatever to just not say anything about it and let other people handle it. Like, we are a new generation coming in, and we are kind of expected, but also a good expected in a way, to be racial kind of justice warriors in a way. So that's what I've learned from this internship, specifically just chatting with my awesome president and boss, and my supervisor and my team. So if anybody else would like to share or can relate in a way.
I do just want to add something to what Evan said. So Evan, you mentioned implicit biases, but it's also recognizing the intersectionality of these issues, because you can't be anti-racist and say, oh, I'm a feminist, because there are Black women and Black trans women and Black non-binary individuals. So keeping that in mind as well. And it happens at all segments of life. For those of you who don't know what intersectionality is, I don't want to say the pylon, but it is it's the crossing of your identities. Like, you can't be one without the other, and how the system is built against all those identities. And it's not just like, oh, was I fired because I'm Black, or is it fired because I'm a woman? And you can't separate them from each other. And I guess I'll talk about my internship experience as well. I'm Layla C. Williams. This summer I entered with Nonprofit Prince George's County. I work directly under Executive Director Tiffany Turner Allen. And so one of the main projects that yes, she's amazing. And so is Takesha. One of the projects that I worked on was Stand Up and Deliver. And that was honestly one of my favorites. It came out of an executive order from County Executive Angela Ossobrooks. And so it was the delivering of hot meals each week to members of the community. And so at first, I was thinking about different things like, how are we affected by coronavirus? What is being left out? What aren't we addressing? And so it dawned on me, it's food insecurity. And so that's what families are facing. And so I worked in the office for about 2 months. And by the end of my time, we'd served almost 5,000 hot meals to individuals all over the county. And so what that really brought to me is that I'm a policy studies major, so I'm very interested in public policy. I'm taking 2 courses this semester, but I also really enjoy the personal aspect of politics. So through this SUAD, Stand Up and Deliver, I was able to speak with members of the community and say oh, this is really great. We really needed this. We get more and more people each week. How can we get more food? How can we spread the word? So that was something that was really impactful with me during this internship. And I'm very, very thankful that I had this opportunity.
Definitely. And one thing that I learned while interning with Nonprofit Prince George's County was about nonprofits in general and seeing the role they play when things take place. We spoke about Stand Up and Deliver. I mean, that's just nonprofits doing what nonprofits do. And I think being a part of the business admin team, I got to see the inner workings behind the scenes, how things are distributed in terms of finances, and also how limited and how constricted we could be sometimes. I was just trying to find the number of nonprofits in Prince George's County versus Montgomery County and other counties, but there is definitely a lot less relatively here in PG compared to our demand. So given our demand, we should have a lot more, or our need rather, we should have a lot more assistance and help for our nonprofits here in PG, but that's just not the case, unfortunately. But yeah, I definitely walked away with a good understanding of how we could be useful as nonprofits, and also how difficult it could be to operate without the right assistance and funding.
I'm on the fundraising and development team, and one thing that I have really enjoyed about working with Nonprofit Prince George's County is how much we stick to our values. Of course, we're always looking for funding from different organizations, but if they're not supporting fighting racial inequity in our country, I don't think we would want their donation at all or to partner with them. And that was just something that was really inspiring to me, because so many times I feel like people say things and then their actions don't follow through with that. But Prince George's County always puts racial equity first. And yeah, that was refreshing to me, I feel like. And just in general, I love being an intern here, talking with all the other nonprofit navigators and sharing resources and learning how people are being actively anti-racist and how they're informing themselves. And I think that's important, because part of how I'm being actively anti-racist is talking to my families and my parents, who might not have as many resources as I do, because they don't. And just last point, one, I saw a graphic a week ago or so that kind of stuck with me, is that, and it was in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. And I just being around an environment where we all agree on that. And we're not, I know I could choose to be ignorant because I'm white and it would be easy for me, but I don't want to. I want to be an ally. So yeah, thank you to everyone who has helped me learn and come to those conclusions.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Aaron, and thank you for sharing everybody else as well. And then what we put in the chat, Layla said that nonprofits are not small businesses, and it's true. We are not. And when it comes to grants and funding, it does make a difference. And we do need funding to offer stipends to our future nonprofit navigators to continue to work here as well. So if you are interested in becoming a member, you can go on over to our website and then click on the membership and renew or start to be able to do one of those. And I just really do appreciate everybody who's being here, and we appreciate that. Continuing on, I guess, from that question, just wanted to actually, would anybody else like to share before we continue on, just about their internship experience, or what Nonprofit Navigators did for you guys, or how we can continue to just how it was, how we continue to be great?
I can add, I was on the community impact team, so I guess my team hasn't shared yet. So our main task this summer was basically to do member outreach. And I thought this was a really cool perspective to get. Like, I loved working with the navigators and hearing from everyone, but it was also really cool just to hear from the actual members of the organization and hear how they've been doing, and hearing a lot about how COVID has impacted a lot of nonprofits. But I think it's really awesome that nonprofit Prince George's County was able to pull off this amazing program for their first year during this time in a pandemic, and we made it work virtually and everything like that. So I think that really reassured me and made me feel like, of course, like, nonprofit Prince George's County is doing great and we're going to help out other people, but just that, like, we were able to pull all of this off and like get to know each other in such a unique way. So that was really cool. And I also just liked hearing from so many different organizations. Like, I realized that nonprofit Prince George's County can really just serve anyone in any nonprofit, anyone in the county or in Maryland, basically. Like, there's just so many different types of people who are connected to this organization, and it kind of reflects in our nonprofit Navigators program how diverse and unique this community is. So I'm really glad that I got to be part of it and learn from you guys and from the members of the community also.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I was also working directly with Tiffany, Keisha, and also Layla on like going into the office like 1 day a week and working with them on updating the membership, but also working with the Stand Up and Deliver program. And I also learned my leadership skills as well. And also I was able to be part of the community check-ins on Fridays. So we would talk with different nonprofits in the county. And I learned a lot from that because I didn't realize, like a lot of you said, there's so many nonprofits in the county, and also working outside the county as well, like in the DC area. And I understand about the funding too, because my mom actually, she has a nonprofit that's a part of nonprofit Prince George's County. It's always a big issue is getting funding and grants and different things like that. So it was a really rewarding experience, and also working with all you guys and learning and just having good discussions too.
To add on to that, being one of the few international students in this Navigators program, it was a really great experience working for a nonprofit in States, and it kind of feels like giving back to the society. But overall, yeah, it feels like like personally, on a personal level, I was able to contribute to the change that we are trying to achieve over the summer. And yeah, it was a great experience. Kudos to all the team members and the upper management as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for sharing. My experience on the marketing communication team, I would say that our biggest project this summer was probably the video that you all just saw. And actually, so to echo something that Steven said earlier about going through school and how his understanding of racism was like, oh, slavery was bad, blah, 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 Martin Luther King Jr. fixed it all. Yeah, like I had a very similar experience. I obviously knew racism existed, but I did a research project in 10th grade about racism. And that's when I learned just how embedded in American society and legislation racial injustice really is. And so it's kind of crazy to me that it took me till I was like 15 years old to really have a comprehensive, and not even comprehensive, just like a baseline, someone said tip of the iceberg, just like that tip of the iceberg understanding of racism in America. So since then, I've done a lot of research about it. I've learned a lot about it. But this opportunity gave me the ability to actually impact the community and see how the language that we craft can hurt or help certain communities, especially communities of color. So being able to be on the ground doing the work that I've kind of read about academically before has been a really great experience.
Thank you, Rachel, for sharing, and Stephen as well. I'm actually from Prince George's County. I'm a product of the Prince George's County public school system, and so like racism and slavery and all these topics are things that I learned like from kindergarten, and it was like because of the passion of my teachers, because they were saying like, who else is going to teach you? Like you're not like you might not learn this from anyone else, and so it was like really instilled for me like in a young age, and I'm so thankful that they taught me this. I mean, learning is continuous, and it's something that like you have to continue to do every single day, but I'm so glad that I had that information. So like when I got out in the world, and I don't want to say like there were things that I expected, but it put things into perspective as well, which did make all the difference.
Of course, and perspective is obviously huge and obviously plays a huge role in everything we do because it is our main, lens, and kind of being able to get different lenses and different access to different lenses, if you will, to be able to just be able to learn more and be more I don't know, better off, better suited for what's happening with the world, and more in an equal place instead of what Stephen said about the slavery and Rachel as well. Just being able to kind of get through that together as a team and as people. But I just wanted to thank you guys all again for sharing your experiences with Nonprofit PGC. And then Elijah, if you would introduce our kind of final question for discussion, and then we can take some more as well from the audience or anybody here. But yeah, go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to add one more thing that I walked away with. I walked away with so much, honestly. But it was honestly a question posed to myself, actually, of who I want to be rather than what I want to be, in the sense that I want to contribute back to my community in anything that I do, in any role, any position that I hold, that I could do very well for myself. But if the people who follow behind me, my community, the other people that I represent aren't also heading down that same trajectory, it really questions what my intentions are and and how far I've really made it, if I can't bring anybody with me. But the last question that I had here was how we will continue to move forward in our community. And that's, I think, a great question to pose right now.
Yeah, just like individuals, or what will we do in the future as nonprofit navigators, or just as people in general, in our journey towards racial equity, with the skills we've learned from this internship. What do we want to learn? What will we do in the future? And how can we continue to move forward? So anybody who wants to answer that is free to.
Can I put in my plug? Please, please, please fill out the census. Also register to vote and vote. It is so important, very, very important. But also like take a look at the candidates. Do your research. Don't just kind of go up like the day of and say, oh, I guess I'll vote for so-and-so. I voted in my first election in the 2018 midterms, and I got the sample ballot, and I was on the phone with my mom because I was at school at the time, and I was just going over like, what does this mean? Who is this person? Okay. And then I did my research, and I came back and mailed in my absentee ballot. So please, please, please fill out the census and vote.
One thing that I want to work on, and I guess I could suggest, is like to bring conversations and the work that we've been doing into other organizations. Like all of us here are also involved in a lot of other things. So if you take what you've learned from Nonprofit Prince George's County, or just in general what you've learned from media or from reading or anything like that, and just bring it into another aspect of your life, that can influence a whole other group of people, even if that's your family or your friends. Just trying to instill all the knowledge that we've gained from this and from other areas onto someone new or someone else.
Yeah, I think bringing it into other organizations is really important. Just like what we've seen with what's his name, Roger Goodell, how the racial justice, the cries for racial justice, like echoing throughout our country, have infiltrated the sports world, right? And this goes all the way back to Colin Kaepernick, before Colin Kaepernick. Like this has been going on for ages, but to see a person like not who hasn't necessarily personally felt those experiences become on the side of racial justice, I think is very powerful.
Yeah, and another example of that as well, coming in just like very, very recently, that you can kind of point to, is the Milwaukee Bucks actually did not walk out before their game, I believe, and did not warm up, I don't think, because of the things that were happening to to Jacob Blake, and the organization and the owners came out with a statement that said, we had we known about this and why they were doing it, we would stand with them no matter what. And that's just that's very powerful to me. Even if they didn't acknowledge or if they didn't know about something beforehand, just being able to kind of reflect back on, oh, this is why they did it. They didn't just jump at the gun and being like, hey, like, why'd you do this? We're going to flip out on you or spaz or anything. They had the time to have a hashtag courageous conversation with their players and what they wanted to do about that and things. And just like how that kind of transfers over to what I want to do for my future and for my continued talk about this. Like, I know I come in and for me specifically, I can kind of take over a conversation and kind of just like not have a lot of like opinions and things into like, they're all coming at me, right? But then I can just be like shut down and be like, okay, so this is what I heard and this is what I want to listen to. But after I kind of slow down and stop and think and reflect back to what I was thinking about during nonprofit PGC time, like, hey, how does this social media post influence what our viewers are going to see? Hey, how does this LinkedIn post connect to our followers and those who follow us? Kind of with that mentality, I think would be awesome for me to like kind of not even after the fact, but before the fact, being able to, all right, let's think about this first. Let's craft a response. Let's try to understand the entire story and the truth and not just what the headlines are putting out, and then make sure that we come in with our facts straight and then just a respectful and just refreshed mind to be able to have a good civil conversation with somebody. So that would be my future thing.
Yeah, Megan, I see your comment. Why was it that when Kaepernick brought Black Lives Matter to light, it was too controversial? But like, and why was society not awoken then and felt the need to fight then? I think very excellent question. But unfortunately, I think we kind of know the answer to that. Why was Kaepernick seen as too radical? Because he was a Black man. Why is Roger Goodell seen as not controversial? Because he's a white man. Like, unfortunately, this is the reality we're living in, and this is the reality that we need to fight to change. Because it shouldn't make a difference who is saying it. It shouldn't make a difference who's calling for justice. If someone is saying that there is an injustice going on in America right now, we should be listening to them regardless of what they look like.
Any others like to share about what they can be doing or what they would like to learn in the future and do in the future based off of the internship this summer?
Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, it's easy to like hear the words courageous conversation and like not like fully take in, I guess, what they mean. But I mean, for many of these times, you do have to be like courageous. I think a lot of us who have, you know, backward thinking, I'm not going to dance around it, racist relatives, or racist family members or close friends. It's daunting, like to talk to them, but obviously like not nearly as daunting as actually facing like racism every day. So I think it's a matter of actually going in and having those conversations, no matter how scary or hopeless they may seem. And then, you know, having conversations with people who are like the backward thinking and racist, but also the people that are maybe agree with you, but are not taking action, actively organizing them and organizing activism. I think to a lot of people, and to me originally, like it sounded pretty daunting. Like, okay, do I have to do like phone banks or go knock on people's doors? I don't think so. Like Facebook makes it really easy to organize and gain like consensus. And like I said, if you live in a city with, you know, 20,000 people or whatever, or you know, even slightly more or less, like it's pretty easy to sway a local vote where turnout is pretty low. And if you're eligible and this is within your wheelhouse, run for office. Like like you can do it. Like go run for something. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to be like anyone like crazy qualified. Like you should, I mean, look at some of like the fact that we see like, you know, very minor things, like the fact that someone owns a business as like a major qualification to like run for like city council or whatever, like you can do it too. And not to say like owning a business is bad, but like there are other ways to be qualified to do these things. So organize, have tough conversations. Well, I'm telling this to myself a lot too. I'm not preaching. I don't mean to preach, but.
To add on to what Stephen said about running for office, that is something that I do plan to do in the future, so look out for me. But also, on average, it's set, like you have to ask a woman 7 times to run for office before she considers it. So I challenge you all, please consider running for office. There are so many programs that prepare women to run for office. So just keep that in mind.
Yet just another reason to join Nonprofit Navigators. We got a potential office chairwoman in the building, but we did want to get to some of the YouTube comments that we have received, and then just Josh says that it's encouraging that the boycotting the different games has gone from basketball, not only basketball, to like baseball and some other sports as well, with fewer African American players in those leagues, and then just kind of a microcosm of the recent development of just non-African Americans becoming more aware and involved. And I think that I can say that for me, for sure, that I've been seeing that in more organizations and more different kind of social places, especially with that as well. And then another just comment that we got. Oh yeah, that was like from what Josh said as well. That was that. And then we did have some required readings that we got to do and look at. And then some of the numbers that I saw in these things were there was like one was titled Racial Inequities in Prince George's County, and we can be able, it was from 2011 to 2015, but we can be able to get that link out to you if you would like to see it. But there's so many different things that can be worked on that we've talked about today, like just continuing with health, and then even the spatial distribution of the racial and ethnic groups, the differences, and like redlining, as somebody mentioned in the comments. And then how we can continue to like just income as well, and what the average is, and how that compares to each other. So definitely getting more educated is going to be great for everybody. Just in general, just getting more educated on what needs to be changed and what is continuing to be changed through us. So wanted to give anybody an opportunity here again. Gonna kind of start to wrap it up. I know you guys have been listening to us for a long time, and we do appreciate that, but I wanted to see if anybody else had any other comments about their internship, or any thing they just want to say, and then we can kind of close as well. And then yeah.
I just think that conversations need to continue. After this all calms down, like we had a little calm after the storm, but there's another storm coming. Like, why was it on social media? I'd go on social media platforms and just see Black Lives Matter has been erased from my feed. Or I have the few friends that posted on their Instagram stories, like, hey, we're still here. Like, why aren't we still discussing this? Like, change isn't like turning off a light, like, boom, it's done. Like, the one thing I think everyone needs to remember is change is going to come, but our world is going to evolve. It's not going to just go from racism to anti-racism. It's going to go from racism to conversations in education and research and voting and discussions like these, like courageous conversations, in order to have that anti-racism. Like, ending racism isn't like in the history books where Martin Luther King just comes out like God and just boom, it's done. No, he made a platform and he helped evolve the world. And instead of keeping silent, like, we're going to have to keep going. Like, it's never going to end. It's a never ending evolution.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And those are really good points. Also, kind of related to continuing to have conversations, going back to what Callie said about the media, like, don't let the media tell you what's, like, the media will just create any narrative they want and will focus on different things. And it makes it seem like everything else is forgotten about or something's not happening, even though it could. So just like checking the media and different resources, because they can completely skew what we think about and what we talk about. So yeah.
Yeah, and but going based off of what Megan said and what Layla said as well in the comments, just the point of Black Lives Matter is to bring on and organize individuals outside of the Black community, like myself and others, to join us in this movement. Right? It is one of the only, or if there's only one person pushing for change, we're going to be tired and frustrated that only one person is pushing for change. And I know for a fact that through this Nonprofit Navigator program and everybody who's talking on this screen now, and you guys who are attending as well, that we're all standing with each other and continuing to push for racial change. And as Elena said, we can only strive to make this society better as a community. It's not going to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. But yeah, it's just gonna happen that way. We're gonna be continuing to move forward with our Nonprofit Navigator program in the fall. But yeah, did anybody else have anything to say just real quick before we kind of conclude today's session?
Yeah, and any questions from the attendees or any of you panelists as well? Any questions you'd like to discuss? Please send them in.
Shout out to you for being inspired. We appreciate you. Audace Garnett, we do love our fans, but on a real note, thank you everybody for attending today. Especially thank you to Tiffany and to Keisha for organizing all of this. Give a big round of applause for everybody. Thank you for all our panelists for being here. I just wanted to kind of plug them real quick. If you wanted to go check out our website, they are on there. Contact them and get in contact with us as well if you would like. If you have any specific questions, don't hesitate to contact connect@nonprofitpgc.org for any, just if you just want to connect about the Nonprofit Navigator program or anything like that. But I'm gonna hand it over to Elijah and Rachel real quick, and then Tiffany will wrap us up in a minute after I give the social media plug. So Elijah?
Definitely. I truly appreciate everyone that listened and tuned in and contributed questions and comments in the chat. Hopefully we all walked away with something. I know us interns, we did walk away with a lot this summer in terms of how we could all be a part of the solution. So again, thank you. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe and stay healthy.
And if you are interested or you know someone who may be interested in being a nonprofit navigator this fall, please visit the website at nonprofitpgc.org and you can take it from there. We would love to have you on the team.
I just wanted to plug our Instagram, social media, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn for future courageous conversations that, Megan, Bhavesh, Alex, and I have worked for our whole summer on. That's kind of our team. So everything is at Nonprofit PGC. So I will paste those real quick into the chat. If you would like, go give us a follow. Don't forget to share everything with us. Please, if you have any comments about how we could run the next one, even better. If you have any other comments about just in general what we can do as a program that you'd like to see, we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany real quick, and then we can kind of sign off. But thank you again for all our attendees from the bottom of my heart. We really do appreciate you being here and having a #courageous conversation with us.
Evan, thank you so much. I want to say thank you to everybody, every single one of you that's here today. And I know there are a significant number of navigators that were unable to join just due to scheduling and school being back in session. But I cannot say how this has just been an absolute privilege and honor to have you all join our team. And so you will always be members and family of Nonprofit Prince George's County. And I give you my word that I'm going to continue to work hard to really get it to the point where you all would be able to engage and stay with us for an entire year. So we're actively going to continue to seek funding opportunities and stream. So this is not the end and this is not goodbye. You're going to still have more conversations with me. I'm going to be engaging with you all. So do not block me from your social media and from your email addresses, okay? But I just want to wish you all good luck for those people who are not going to be returning with us next semester. But I also want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for not just the work that you've done externally, but for the work that you did internally, like listening and allowing yourselves to, be pushed past the point of comfort so that you could really dig in and lean in and learn and share and being vulnerable and transparent in that process. So I can't say thank you enough. This has been amazing. And you all make all of the long days and long hours worth every single moment. So I can't wait to see all the great things that you all are going to do, not in this space, but also beyond. So thank you. So take care, everybody.
Bye, guys.